a webinar put together by the ACRL Digital Scholarship Section Digital Humanities Discussion Group. My name is Dan Tracy. I am one of the co-conveners of the discussion group. I'm the outgoing co-convener this year. And then Nicole Eichmann-Kalwara is this is her first year as a co-convener, and she will be continuing after ALA. We're your co-hosts today. Nicole has a little bit of a cold, but I do want to note that and thank her for all the work she did to pull together the speakers for this event today. What we have put together is a panel of folks to talk to you about digital pedagogy and digital humanities, so strategies for teaching DH competencies and building partnerships. What I'm going to do is introduce the speakers and read off their biographies and just a very brief summary from their abstracts. And then I will turn it over to each of them. They will be speaking in the order that you can see on the screen here: Jennifer Nichols, Caitlin Pollock, and Patrick Williams. Each of them will speak for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we will open things up for questions at the end. So I will ask you to hold your questions for the end, or you can type them in the chat box, but we'll hold discussion of those until the very end. All right, in terms of the speakers, first up we will have Jennifer Nichols, who is the Digital Scholarship Librarian at the University of Arizona Libraries in Tucson, Arizona. She has led the growth and development of iSpace, the first publicly accessible and interdisciplinary makerspace at the University of Arizona in the Albert B. Weaver Science Engineering Library. She coordinates training and digital scholarship support services for campus and the local community, including the successful annual UA Women's Hackathon and Research Bazaar. Her current research centers around designing for equity and inclusion in digital spaces, library services, and makerspaces. And Jennifer today is going to talk about strategies for identifying and building partnerships, sustaining programming, and growing communities. After Jennifer, we will have Caitlin Pollock, who is the Digital Humanities Librarian serving the IUPUI University Library Center for Digital Scholarship. In her position, she supports faculty and student research and teaching, or research and learning. She earned an MSLIS from Pratt Institute in 2011 and an MA in Digital Humanities from Loyola University Chicago in 2014. Caitlin will talk about providing DH services on an urban medical science campus with a large commuter student population and the related issues that arise when teaching DH in that context. And then finally, we will have Patrick Williams, who is the librarian for literature, rhetoric, and digital humanities at Syracuse University. He is co-editor-in-chief of DH and Lit plus Lib, and he edits Really System, a journal of extensible poetics. He received a BA from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro and an MS and PhD in information studies from the University of Texas at Austin. Patrick will talk about what he has learned about working within and across existing structures to raise visibility and access to digital scholarship, and he will share strategies for teaching DH skills in a way that aspires to build community. So thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen so that Jennifer can share her slides.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Let's see here. Okay, can everyone see that? I made them a little bit small because I need to be able to read my notes at the same time, so hopefully everyone can see. So I am at the University of Arizona, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my strategies for building a community and give a little context for the approach that we've taken at the University of Arizona. So when I started here in this position, it was in 2017, and really at the University of Arizona Libraries, digital scholarship was initially focused more on makerspace programming and technologies, and the digital humanities collaborations using those tools. So things like virtual reality, 3D modeling, and that kind of thing. With this focus, the makerspace became our hub for digital scholarship, and our emerging geospatial and data science training and communities started within that space. So we have scoped digital scholarship to maker technologies and community building, data science, and DH. This is somewhat different than our peers, but it helps center the libraries around the development of maker culture at campus and build partnerships within the community with both campus community partners and community-wide partners like Google Developers Group or the Research Bazaar community. So myself and the data science librarian joined this department in the library called the Office of Digital Innovation and Stewardship in 2017. Both of us had been at the library in other capacities. And we, as we grew the work within the space, we kind of grew these full-time positions. So by joining the Office of Digital Innovation and Stewardship, we joined our colleagues doing GIS and research data management. And that department really, in many of our peer institutions, is multiple departments. We have scholarly communications, research data management, RIM, digital preservation, geospatial data, metadata, digital scholarship, all wrapped into one department. Oops, wrong direction, sorry. So really the basis of the work that we do is our network. And this graphic is just showing ODIS at the center, which is the Office of Digital Innovation and Stewardship, and other library units as well. Really, the key thing here is the redundancy in our network. We all have so many connections to these external units, and because we all are operating possibly all of us in flat budgets or reduced budgets, we're really trying to think of sustainable ways to support this growing area of work. And, it's not just digital humanities. By combining with data science, we're really acknowledging and calling, my position digital scholarship, acknowledging that there is a lot of digital humanities work, but there's a lot of digital scholarship work across disciplines that we can support. So you'll see that, we're connected to our School of Information, the College of Humanities, doing a lot of DH stuff, but we're also really connected with kind of the Data Science Institute, the growing kind of data science movement on campus, and then our research computing in the IT department, and the Research Discovery and Innovation Unit supports all of our external grants. So really trying to build out these networks to support the work, because there's a lot of expertise there and we can't possibly provide all that expertise to campus and grow it from our staffing. So what we started out with was a lot of drop-in sessions and workshops, again, using this network and then using our own skills. So we do host workshops in the space. We've been doing that a little bit less now as we get into renovations, which I'll talk about in a moment. But we provide space both for folks in the library to provide workshops and our partners. We also use that space, because it is our maker space, to pilot and prototype access to new technologies. So for example, there was a lot of virtual reality development going on campus, and we spun up a virtual reality studio out of that need. And then we try to take advantage of the things that libraries have always been good at. Equipment lending is one of those things, I'm sure many of you do. So in our digital humanities networks, it became important to be able to lend some of this equipment, because it's expensive to be able to provide it for instruction or research support, or people would acquire things for grants and not need them anymore. So trying to fill in that void and kind of make it more efficient, right? So if someone is acquiring technology that they might not be using anymore, instead of it sitting in a closet, how could we work together to make it available to others? So those are some of the ways that we've worked on our added value to campus, I suppose. So when we first started a couple of years ago, I started this series called Friday Tech Talks, and that was a way to introduce the iSpace to campus by inviting popular speakers or hosting talks on interesting topics. And what was great about that was many speakers bring their own audiences, and then other people who come volunteer to give talks, and they meet new collaborators. So the idea was really focused on how do we build community, right? You can build a space, you can say that you have expertise, but if you're not building community, it's not sustainable for us. So I used that platform to grow the network, and it worked really well. So some of the first semester presenters have become long-term partners of ours, like the data scientist who runs a student developer unit in the business college. They do a big bulk of project development for digital humanities projects on campus that come out of the Center for Digital Humanities. Our campus's Center for Digital Humanities is focused in the College of Humanities, and it only provides grant support for faculty within the college. So we're a partner organization, but for folks on campus who are in other colleges and departments who want to do digital humanities projects, they can't necessarily go to that center. So the library is a complement to that. And so we're trying to fill in kind of the ecosystem so that we can make referrals to one another. I hope that makes sense. So other tech talks that we've focused on have been around data visualization, teaching with augmented reality, language learning with speech recognition software. And then we moved into more library specialist focused topics last year, like social network analysis, version control with Git, data management, and topic modeling. So I mentioned our data science specialist, Jeff Oliver. He has a really popular and longstanding R drop-in on Tuesdays, and that rotates every other week with a focused workshop and then drop-in hours. And it's cultivated this huge following of people from about 11 colleges, something like 60 departments. And so he'll do a lot of the most popular workshops are around data visualization, but they also do, basic statistics, reproducible reports, things like that. And they really lead to in-depth consultations, and they can, we really learn to capitalize on those to make referrals to other colleagues in the library, and even making connections to long-term grants that librarians have been written into. So another focus of ours has been to support collaborative events, and you'll see the virtual reality summit there came out of our research office. Folks were looking for who was doing virtual reality research on campus, and they came to us because we had the studio, and their list of people was completely different than my list of people who are doing VR research. So we came together and decided to do a showcase and ask people to demo the work that they're doing and build that community. So we had a 2-day summit in 2017, and then we just did another 1-day one the fall of 2018 in November. And the idea is really to not only showcase to campus what VR research is happening, but also to build that network so that people know one another across disciplines. So we have folks in medicine, in architecture, in engineering, in humanities, and everyone's comparing notes and talking about different strategies, talking about what kind of training their students need. And it's been really successful in kind of building that community. This is the featured photos from our Women's Hackathon. We just did the 4th annual Women's Hackathon. It started in 2015 from a student who was instrumental, Maggie, she's there in the background, instrumental in starting the makerspace actually, and wrote her dissertation on women in makerspaces, and now she's a professor at the School of Information at UNC Chapel Hill. And so that really grew out of her attending our regular student hackathon and wanting to see more equitable practices. So the first year there was 50 attendees. Last year we had over 300. So we've really institutionalized that. It's a 2-day totally free event, really focused on building skills and community and creating safe practices. And we've gotten great feedback in opening it up to the entire community. So you'll see that there's some young people there, we have high school students, we have retirees, and we have opened it up to all genders. So we've really used this as a platform for trying out new practices around equity and inclusion, and really having those conversations with our community. Research Bazaar is kind of the last example of our big collaborative events, and we do that in the spring. We usually do it around now, but we're going to postpone it till May this year. This will be the 3rd year. And that is in collaboration with our research office and our research computing and a group called Cyverse, which is an NSF-funded cyber infrastructure project, which you may have heard about if you work with big data across the country and across the world. But Research Bazaar came out of Australia, and it was this idea of, I mean, you can see we have the blankets on the ground. They really did this effort to make it more like a bazaar, you know. And so we do that in the spring this year. We wanted to really deliberately invite social sciences and humanities to the table. So we wanted to do workshops, even if they're the same as, you know, if you're doing an R workshop and you're a biologist, it's going to be the same information if you're a humanist, but we wanted to create it a more welcoming and accessible environment. So we're going to do deliberate workshops for these communities so they feel safe. Okay, so in closing, I want to say, you know, in building community and supporting DH, especially with limited capacity among your staff, you know, my rules of thumb are be a good partner and build capacity in your library. So we do library carpentry workshops every year to try to build the confidence and skill of our librarians, and continue to show up and show these, you know, support these bigger programs. And then I just wanted to show you renderings of our new renovation that just started. This will be our data studio. The iSpace is moving to the main library. It's going to occupy a much larger footprint and have a data studio, a VR studio, and a maker studio. And there's the maker studio, and it'll be called the Catalyst Studio. So we are currently interviewing folks for the director of this space, and there'll be 2 managers to manage the technology and the programming in that space. So we're really excited, and just want to say that even though it's an unusual way of going about what we're doing, having started in an organic way has really been to our advantage and allowed us to build infrastructure and partnerships that we wouldn't have had otherwise. Okay, I will stop sharing and let Caitlin go.
Super, thank you. And next up, we're going to have Caitlin Pollock, Caitlin, if you want to go ahead and share your slides, go ahead. I'll just remind everybody, we're going to save questions till the end, but if you do have questions you want to get in the queue, feel free to put those in the chat, and Nicole and I will be tracking those to come back to when we get to the Q&A. All right, go ahead, Caitlin.
I just want to confirm that it's the right, it's not my notes, right?
Yeah, I see your slides.
Okay, but not my notes.
I don't see any notes, no.
Okay, good. So I'm Caitlin Pollock. I'm the Digital Humanities Research Librarian at IUPUI. So IUPUI is a mostly medical campus. The IU School of Medicine is on campus, and I would say the majority of the programs kind of focus on a science curriculum. So for example, our School of Informatics has a very kind of bioinformatics focus and not so much on cultural or human informatics. So when I started here, I actually applied for a subject librarian job that had a little bit of DH, and in interviewing me, they realized that I was a DH librarian who had like a little bit of subject librarian in her, and so they flipped the job for me. So when I arrived here, I had all intentions of doing workshops in the library and holding events. And what I quickly realized, because we are a commuter campus that has a lot of non-traditional students, which is a phrase I don't really like, but it fits for right now. Older students, students who have full-time jobs, students who have families, who may not be living on campus, I quickly found that even if I built it, they probably wouldn't come. So often you'd hold events and 5 people would show up and they'd also be your coworkers, when that may not be the audience I was trying to reach. So I found this kind of lack of a community of practice. Humanities was not the focus at that time of the campus. So I started rethinking how I could do workshops. And in doing so, I kind of started developing this idea of critical kindness as a methodology. And it's something that I'm still playing with, so it's still kind of in a transitional phase. And I'll say that I'm currently working on my tenure dossier, so I'm in a very reflective mood, as it were. So thinking about critical kindness as a methodology, what does it mean to be kind as a method? It means treating students with kindness and patience, but also treating yourself with kindness and patience. Respecting the time and labor of students. Our students are very busy. They're assessed a lot, as undergraduates especially, and kind of thinking about ways to manage their expectations and your expectations. And I try to be aware of cognition overload. I can see students get overwhelmed in workshops. I can see them kind of just, their brains just stop and they no longer are learning anything new, and to kind of take that into consideration when I'm leading workshops. And then also giving yourself time to unwind and recover after workshops is just as important. I'm an introvert by nature, and I find that working workshops actually exhausts me, and I need to find ways to relieve myself of that exhaustion in order to move forward. And then also creating workshop exercises and materials with care and consideration. So what humanities data are being used? Does it make sense for the workshop? And then this one in particular, often in humanities, digital humanities workshops, the data or the materials being used tend to be about humans, obviously, but I find that they tend to have almost a cavalier treatment of the data, especially when it's data pertaining to marginalized communities. So thinking about how this data either upholds or just recreates situations of abuse or subjugation. And basically don't use humanities data for like experimentation or just to show a tool off. I feel like it devalues the humanity of the data. And so with this in mind, I started thinking about how I could build partnerships and reach students. And because no one was attending my workshops that I was holding in the library in terms of students and the teaching faculty, I started collaborating with subject librarian colleagues to assist with network and outreach. So I would ask if I could go along to faculty meetings, for example, and just do a quick presentation on what I could offer as an in-class workshop. One time I attended a graduate student ice cream social. I kind of feel like I just crashed it, but I just showed up, gave up my card, talked about digital storytelling, digital narratives. So I saw that was a really important aspect of the English department. And from there, started getting into classes to teach tools. And I also started looking for opportunities to engage with students. I joined mentoring programs because I'm also a subject liaison. I have an entry that way. So I would offer to be mentoring students. I would propose projects for mentoring programs that had a digital scholarship aspect. And then I would also take any opportunity to coordinate library tables at orientations and similar events, kind of like, you know, for graduate students, and they'd have their tables, and I would always offer to coordinate the library table, because it gave me a chance to talk to students, to tell them what DH even was, why they could maybe think of a more exciting or new avenue for their work rather than another paper, another essay. So meeting students, meeting faculty where they are, because sometimes holding student-focused events at the library was not always successful, including I've started doing DH open hours, but not doing them in the library, rather doing them over in the School of Liberal Arts, doing them in our Arts and Humanities Institute as a way to break myself out of the silo of the library on our campus. The library is pretty self-contained, and it's really hard to do kind of inter-institution, inter-division collaborations. So I found by just being there, my presence in the building offered new avenues, including talking to faculty about including TEI into their classes, creating kind of a lab where students could learn TEI, for example, document editing for the history department. And then afterwards, when I teach the workshops in class, engaging with the students afterwards including, assessment, but also talking to them, hearing their ideas with the tools they may have just learned, or the new subfield, or the new method, and seeing what's sparking them and getting a sense of what I can then offer in the future. Seeing, kind of matching my service to what the students are interested in doing. And then when I actually teach the workshops, what I have developed as a rule is that everything will go wrong, or kind of putting the digital and digital humanities, the computer usually won't work. I have found that collaboration is also key here. And so I will ask another digital scholarship librarian or a subject librarian to help me teach. In terms of what I have found to be really useful is to have someone on the floor who can troubleshoot as you lead your workshop. My very first workshop in a class, I taught by myself. In the middle of it, I said, "Are there any questions?" And about every hand went up. And so it stopped the workshop completely as I went around to each computer to see what was going on. If you can collaborate, if you can co-teach, it'll make the workshop so much smoother, so it doesn't have to stop here. The workshop can keep moving as students work through the troubleshooting, try to figure out the tool for themselves. And then I always find that preparation and labor. So being flexible in your workshop, I like to make mine modular so I can move it around, especially if it's an intensive, like week-long workshop. So the idea is that students can learn at their own pace. Sometimes skills will change from class to class. So thinking about how you can offer opportunities for students to have ownership over their own education, over their own learning. I would say the challenges in doing this is that tools and platforms are incredibly mercurial, especially when they're web applications. I try to use tools that can scale. So if there's a student who's not very comfortable with computers or technology, they can still learn the tool, they can still use it in their research. But then I like to find tools that might offer a GitHub repo that'll allow students who are interested in programming and coding to download it and maybe do something a little bit different than those other students. But what I have found is sometimes, for example, a mapping platform will just change everything and go from there, change their freemium plans completely so that no one can log in. I once had a mapping platform that when I went back in to look at it to make sure the platform hadn't changed, it didn't look like it had changed, but they just hadn't pushed the changes to my account. So every student who logged in saw something completely different, which is a problem when part of my preparation is to create a guide so that students can follow along at their own pace, or they can go ahead as they want to as the workshop is happening. But it kind of doesn't work when none of the screenshots match what the actual platform looks at. And then the other issue that I have found is once an application did server maintenance in the middle of the semester, and I woke up to 20 emails from frantic students who couldn't see their projects. So keeping those in mind of the kind of shifting nature of applications, of tools, thinking about how they change with every computer they're installed on. If it's a web application, thinking about the kind of ephemeral nature of the internet. And then also what I see is a fish out of water dilemma. It's that even students who feel that they're proficient with a computer or technology, it's that idea when you're learning something new, you kind of just feel out of place, and all the kind of skills you once had feel foreign to you. And kind of making that an expectation of students that they're going to feel uncomfortable, that they're going to be learning something new, that no one here is judging them. I'm not judging them. The internet is not a sentient being yet. It is not judging them. And they can just make things and fail. And that here's a space where it's okay to do that and kind of handle that fish out of water dilemma. And following that, I make any guides, any materials that I use available via Google Drive or Box with an open URL the students can go back to time and time again as they do this in their own work. And then, of course, the labor doesn't stop at the workshop. So assessment is key. So I always believe in choosing the form of assessment that makes sense for the type of workshop you're giving and who the audience is. I'm always very aware of what type of assessment works best for me and works best for my audience in terms of giving it to me. I find with undergraduates, I really prefer that they do kind of 1-minute essays. What did they like? What did they learn? What were they confused by? Rather than a form that has like a multiple choice or good, bad, worse, and thinking about what exactly they got out of it. For graduate students, faculty, I find that they tend to have a little bit more knowledge of their skills heading into a workshop. And so asking kind of multiple choice or barometers tends to be more effective. But then also I try to think about what is going on in an assessment from a student or a faculty member, what sort of biases might they hold about a library or a librarian, and I try to put myself into the actual assessment as well. And then I find that after almost any workshop, there's a one-on-one consultation, either in person or via email. You're now the expert in the student's eyes, and you will be getting questions afterwards. So while they're inevitable, I always try to decide on how much of myself to give. And I try to match myself to the level of engagement of the person asking for the consultation. If they want a quick and easy kind of like, how do I do this? That's what I give them. If they're ready to sit down and design things and think about flow and put some real effort into it, then I'll match that effort. And then self-reflection. We often ask students or workshop participants to assess us, but I believe in assessing myself. So I ask what I could have done that was better, what did I feel was uncomfortable or awkward in the workshop, but also trying to decide if that was something I had control over, if that was something that I could fix for the future, or if that's just the nature of the workshop. And as soon as I accept it, then I can give the students that expectation. And the last one is making your work legible. So what I had to do in my library that was very geared towards the kind of traditional bibliographic one-shot sessions with librarians was to differentiate DH workshops happening in the classroom as opposed to kind of database or research instruction happening in classes. It was really unclear to my first committee what the difference was. And so they were expecting this similar labor input as both. But I found that I needed to explain for kind of DH workshops, I literally have to do the workshop myself, screenshot things, kind of identify places where people might get tripped up, and then also create materials for it so people can bring in, so there could be dummy materials. And then of course, speaking on your workshops as the greater implications of the workshops for student education, how it extended and re-envisioned our library of services. Instead of just, here's a database, here's how it works, here's a different type of research instruction that is tool-based or methodology-based in digital scholarship. And then making your labor clear to AOLs and promotion committees. And then of course, sharing your teaching materials, sharing slides. I've started making my workshops into GitHub repositories so other people can find them, and just using Creative Commons licenses that allow for reuse and sharing. And that's the end.
Thank you, Caitlin. Next up, we will have Patrick Williams. Patrick, if you want to go ahead and share slides, you're welcome to. And again, a reminder, we are collecting questions for the end here. So we are tracking those in a separate document. So we'll come back to those, any questions that people put in the chat box after Patrick's presentation. So I will turn it over to you, Patrick.
Sorry about that. I think I just made it full screen and took away my ability to unmute myself. So I'm going to try that again. So hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Patrick Williams, librarian for Literature, Rhetoric, and Digital Humanities here at Syracuse University Libraries. And I'm going to talk a bit about how our digital humanities community has developed over the last several years. This image is of the building I'm currently transmitting from, which is Bird Library. And maybe the 90s VHS trees in the foreground which are actually much larger now and covered in snow, are a metaphor for how our digital scholarship community has matured over the past few years, slowly, cumulatively, and at the intersections of our campus. I want to start with a little bit about me. Last month marked my 10th year here at SU, and I spent a lot of that time trying to get to know the contours of our institution. And I think I almost have it figured out at this point. I began my time here, like many now digital humanities librarians, as a subject specialist, engaged in research support and collection development for English, communication and rhetorical studies, writing studies, and linguistics. My interest in DH began in my research and also in my work supporting students and faculty in those disciplines. And this was, of course, alongside many of our literature and writing faculty getting interested in DH topics. And also our English department has a strong media and screen studies cohort, which has allowed us to concentrate on digital gaming as well. Most of my early work in supporting digital literacies came through open workshops for graduate students, working with faculty, individual faculty members on special projects, and reaching out to departments to talk about the digital capabilities of our collections. It mostly didn't happen in very public spaces. In 2012, I requested funding from my library for a series of events called the Issues in Digital Scholarship Forum, because I was seeing a lot of great work happening on campus, but it was only known in little pockets and silos. And I also wanted to find a way to bring others to campus to speak on those topics. So that series is still going strong and has included national and regional speakers, as well as opportunities for people on our own campus to tell their DH stories to a broad audience. The series has also been instrumental in our 2014 and 2017 DAT camps and is supporting our upcoming DAT camp in April. But in 2014, thanks to that first DAT camp and a call for event proposals on the theme of networks from our Humanities Center, an emergent and diverse group of faculty and staff coalesced to see what we could make happen. Our series of DH events under the symposium was approved and established an interdisciplinary DH conversation on campus for what I think is the first time. From there, our digital humanities faculty working group was born, received a small but useful grant from the College of Arts and Sciences, and was accompanied by a parallel student group. And these groups, even as loosely coordinated as they have been, have enabled a big increase in visible DH activity on our campus, and they brought even more partners out of the woodwork. So in 2016, my title changed and I was given explicit functional responsibility for DH in the library. And at that point, I found myself working with a wider array of subject areas than my traditional subject specialist role. And also my digital literacies workshops and activities became more anchored in undergraduate course contexts. Also, I joined our newly formed digital library program core team at that point. And in terms of our greater campus context, SU is a fairly large university split among many schools and colleges, of course. We have no formal digital humanities program, center, or department, though interest is spread out all over the university. We do have a great humanities center that's one locus of lots of activity. And recently, a lot of resources have been invested in undergraduate resource across our campus. There's an integrated learning minor in digital humanities in the works among a few departments, including English and writing, and making use of many of the courses that I often work with. And building DH capacity and community is a stated strategic goal in our libraries. In fact, we are host to a digital scholarship space that is a collaboration among the libraries, Campus UT, and some of the DH faculty working group. It's a flexible, informal, and technology and collections rich space where we teach DH-related classes, game studies classes, and where we hold workshops and events. So I share all of this history to show you that there's nothing that we're doing on our campus that just dropped from the sky. It's all been iterative, collaborative, and has included many small victories along the way. My most persistent challenge has been reaching people this emergent community fails to, and to find and support those who may not themselves identify as digital humanists, digital scholars, or even potential partners with the activities that we engage in. In my role, my goals are to support and to welcome, to create an ethos of sharing and collaboration. And I know there are many contexts in which a little digital literacy training in text analysis or visualization or mapping or data practices can go a long way. So I'm always looking to share what folks are doing, translating that for spaces and audiences that might benefit. Part of my approach is to offer lots of ways in. So over the years, I've realized that my most effective and satisfying DH work has happened when there are lots of roles available for people to step into, to try on, or to explore. And also an openness that these roles shift relative to people's responsibilities, interests, and incentives. Because we don't have as many resources as we'd like to support our DH activities, we're often looking for co-sponsors and co-organizers for our events, which offer more of that participation in different ways. And I also think it shows a commitment to collaboration and extends the reach of our workshops when we include folks from other audiences. Similarly, we've tried to mix up the types of events that we do to allow for recognition of faculty, graduate, student, and undergraduate work, and even for engagement across those lines, as has happened with our DH Research Symposium last year, where student panels presented their work with faculty and staff champions and respondents. Many groups co-sponsored that event. We got a large audience of mostly students, and we really got to see the kind of dialogue that I hope to encourage with the events that we have. In addition to supporting established speakers and structures on DH topics on our campus, we've also arranged more informal mini conferences among faculty or graduate student researchers that are still aimed at a broad audience. We're always looking to find low threshold ways for folks to participate in classrooms and in workshops with their sleeves rolled up in front of an audience, or even just as a member of an audience. One of the things that I've learned is that making space to talk about the work and about our triumphs and challenges in different situations and among different audiences has really strengthened our community. It's drawn more attention to our work, and it's helped us to identify other patrons, partners, and participants which we may not have cultivated under our previous models of engagement. This means I'm always looking for ways to tell the stories we encounter and share the work that we're supporting. And just having these conversations, I found, can kind of be the most important part of the outreach that I'm doing. And oftentimes those conversations have a surprisingly long-term shelf life. And a year or 2 years later, somebody you had a conversation with comes back and is finally ready to participate. While we do have some high-profile projects at SU, like our Marcel Breuer Digital Archive, what I'm most interested in is having a pocket full of successful collaborations that I can use to bring in new audiences and draw attention to what we can support, and things that are meaningful in different contexts. So a well-placed anecdote or a handout or a presentation can be the link to our DH community for people new to campus, or can prompt a reference question, or can generate a request that will find its way back to me. My true goal is to never miss a chance to tell a DH story to a new audience on our campus. I want to close with some suggestions for partnerships that maybe 6 or 7 years ago I probably wouldn't have been equipped to make. But these partnerships, some of which have been pretty surprising to me, have been essential in building community on our campus and ensuring that we reach as broad an audience as we have. They also represent, I think, great candidates for library engagement in general, shared responsibilities, shared values, and they seem to be excited about the partnerships that as we are. And so I'm going to share a list here of some of the ones over the years that I found to be eager and helpful. And definitely some of these are partnerships that I would have missed if I hadn't encountered them through some of our informal channels. We partner a lot with the graduate school for various orientations, for their methods symposia, for their dissertation training events, but also in the context of their future professoriate program, which prepares graduate students for work in the academy. And also we participate with them in some of their grant-related activities. Our graduate career services staff have been especially interested in digital skills and literacies well before students go on the market. And they've worked with us to ensure that students are thinking about their careers and the skills that they'll need to develop early on in their graduate programs. And that's been a really, I think, successful partnership. And one of the graduate career services staff there is actually a bit of a digital humanist himself, and he's been really encouraging with students. Our new faculty orientation teams on campus in the different schools and colleges, and even with our library orientation teams, really have given us a chance to reach potential new working group members, new collaborators who may or may not have had digital humanities support in their previous libraries, though I'm finding more and more often they are looking for those services right away when they get to campus. And getting to meet them early on in those early days means that we can often get on their syllabi in their first semester and start collaborating right away. I mentioned our Humanities Center before, and it's really one of the most important partners we have because it serves as a hub, a co-sponsor, a booster, a funder, and often a site of some of the informal conversations around digital humanities and humanities research methods. But also our regional humanities corridor organization, which links us with other academic libraries and campuses, has really given us a broader pool of examples and partners to collaborate with, to bring to campus, to discuss things. And also it helps with our funding. Getting the word out is something that has helped us build and sustain an audience with both our library's external relations people and media people in the schools and colleges that we work with. They're often very excited to see, to have people to interview, to build stories around, and they often accept pitches for story ideas. And finally, perhaps the most unexpected and related group to the media contacts is our development offices on campus. They've really shown a lot of interest in recent years in digital humanities research on campus and are attempting to, are really interested in getting the word out about the work that's being done here. And also, I'll say that the alumni and other communities they connect with aren't typically the ones that are easy for us to have access to. The other thing about the development groups is that they also happen to be skilled in telling broad and compelling stories about our work, and we've learned new ways to talk about that work through that collaboration. Here's an example of a story they put together that really put a lot of the research on campus into context for us. So I put a lot of time and effort into training and workshops, keeping up with things, and planning events, but I feel like the time that I spend communicating, celebrating, and reaching new audiences with our work is what feels like the most important emphasis of my job. It feels like what sustains that work, and it feels like what cares for the networks that are often engaged in that work. So the fact that these relationships have merged over time, as all of us have been making sense of the digital scholarship landscape on our campus, that's meant that I have lots of partners who are mutually invested in our success, whose experience is very deep, and who are very helpful in making visible the impact digital literacies are having in their classes, in their own work, and all over our campus. And honestly, I think a culmination of this is happening for us this year, because this year we have a week full of events, digital humanities-focused events in April that were planned by 4 different groups with some coordination. So we're all going to be sharing audiences, and our events will lead into one another and really kind of spend time drawing attention to the work that's happening on this campus. So to me, all of these events feel like celebrations, and I think that sort of celebratory nature of a lot of the work that we're able to do in these public spaces is what keeps people coming and collaborating. And with that, that is all I have to share today, but thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you, Patrick, and thank you again to all of our panelists. At this time, we're going to get into the Q&A part. So please do go ahead and share any questions you have in the chat box. We have a couple queued up that we will start with, and then we will proceed to any new ones that appear in the meantime. I'll start with a question that is for everybody that came in through the chat. Do you all have any ideas for how to connect faculty and graduate students from different disciplines from your experiences? For example, computer science and English or history. And so the person is saying we would like to help students and faculty connect with each other so that they can identify opportunities for collaboration across those different disciplinary boundaries. Turn that over to the panelists. Anybody want to jump in with their experiences there?
Hi, this is Jennifer. So I do want to say that we've had success in some of the big events, which I know are not everyone has those opportunities, but things like the hackathon allowed people, we would advertise to different groups of people, and a lot of times only people who think that they're good at programming or engineering will show up to things like that. But we deliberately used different marketing techniques to get interdisciplinary teams to participate, and taught workshops, the entry-level workshops around coding and different things, so that different kinds of people would come, and then people pitch ideas and work together on those ideas. And there's been a lot of success in getting interdisciplinary teams to participate in that way. And then the second thing is when we partnered up with those people who taught software carpentry, they were mostly teaching, again, to scientists, but scientists like biologists who knew nothing about data science, but were really increasingly finding that they needed to. And so as we've been working together, they get together and have drop-in support every week. And as I meet social scientists and humanists who want to do topic modeling or text mining, I bring them over to that group of people because they're really generous technologists who can think through problems in all different ways. I think that they naturally wouldn't feel like they identified with those communities, but that kind of introduction into the group and the purposeful like remarketing of stuff. So the Research Bazaar group saying like, this is not just for like computational thinking is for everyone, and how do we market it differently to each group of people has been a conversation that we have a lot. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Thanks. Patrick or Caitlin, want to jump in with any experiences you have with that?
I'll just say quickly that I found, so we're a school that happens to have a school of information on campus, and that's been a place where some of those intersections happen, which I felt has been a great place to start. And the other thing I'll mention is that I've worked with the other subject specialists in the libraries to make sure that our events are, that are enticing to some of those other interdisciplinary groups or groups that are in different schools and colleges. Because they have those relationships, and it's been really helpful to talk to them.
I'll just say that I sometimes act like a matchmaker. So I try to remember or keep track of the conversations I've had with people and then make connections myself. So there's someone in informatics who has a class that he likes to build a project in, so the class is experience creating and developing and coding a project. And I try to keep in mind the humanities faculty who come to me saying that they want to build this, but they don't have any support for it, and trying to put people together and put heads together.
All right, thank you. Our next question is for Caitlin. Actually, can you talk more about kindness as a method, and in particular, how you apply it to yourself and how you teach it as a method to learners?
Sure. So I don't teach kindness as a method. It's more of a teaching method. So it's the way that I interact with students. And then being kind to myself, I found in my first year in this position that I was burning out really fast and I was really hard on myself, because I am naturally introspective, that I would fixate on everything that I did wrong, or every time I was awkward, or every time that our computer didn't work and I had to sit there and troubleshoot it live in front of students who looked, to be frank, really bored. And so I started thinking about a different way to assess myself afterwards and kind of learn to let things go and try to figure out what I could control for and what I couldn't, and just accept those differences. And then in terms of using kindness to work with students, is realizing that the way they approach projects is not a reflection on themselves as people. It's not a reflection on their work ethic. It's more a reflection on how excited I can get them for a project, but also considering all of the other things they have on their plate. And in teaching with kindness, I think the idea sometimes in academia is that the classroom or the lab is a crucible and we birth students out of fire. And I don't know if that's always, I don't think that's a way that's inclusive. I think that's a really great way to turn away or exclude white women and people of color. And so this idea was creating a teaching methodology for myself that I thought was inclusive, was equitable, and then would also not scare students. Undergraduate faculty, when learning a new technology, I think people can become really overwhelmed, especially when it comes to computers. They almost feel like black boxes sometimes. They're not very transparent in how they work. And I find that people shut down. But I feel as though if you can help them understand that like no one gets this and like everyone fumbles, then they feel relieved that they're not the only ones having trouble. And that's what I've discovered, that when I have to troubleshoot live, or if I have to mutter to myself and mutter to the computer as I try to figure something out, I've had students say that that actually helped them realize that like even experts like hit computers sometimes, or computers fail them, or whatever sort of way we sorry, my stutter's coming back in, the way that we humanize computers when we really shouldn't.
Thank you, Caitlin. The next question's for Patrick. Somebody you mentioned there's a student DH working group, and could you tell us more about their roles and contributions as it relates to your work?
Sure. The student DH group was assembled as a means of contacting people who might be interested in that camp and that were kind of self-organizing around what they might be interested in. And that group, of course, has students in it who are here for 2-year programs, who are here for doctoral programs and longer. And it's a way that I've used to kind of try to informally sustain some of that community that maybe is more, maybe there's more people moving in and out of the campus, but being able to keep some sort of momentum alive there. So that group has been really good at being organizers and participant in our DAC camp activities, and also they're my go-to group for when I'm auditioning a new workshop, or I'm trying a new set of events. They're people that I always include on there that can just spread the word. They also will, they're in touch with the new students who I might not have met yet, so it's a way of getting directly to them.
Thank you. And then there was another question for Patrick, though. It's, I think, a fairly quick question, is what was the turnout for the DH symposium?
Oh, that's a great question. So there was an audience of about 50 people. It was a sustained event that lasted over about 2.5 or 3 hours. About 15 student panelists in 45-ish minute blocks. And the audience was mostly students, almost probably 50 students and the faculty that were associated with the classes and the faculty respondents.
Thank you. And then I have a question for Jennifer, actually. You mentioned the revolving, there's somebody, I think one of your external partners it was, that was doing a kind of alternating weeks workshop on R with office hours. And I was kind of curious if you could say, and you mentioned that kind of led to further consultations on projects, which is something that I think probably a lot of people see, is that workshops can often be something that lead to consultations like that. But I was curious, I think you said it was an external partner, like what, in this case, because it is a pretty substantial commitment, it sounds like, what the, how this fits into that person's work. Do they have some sort of official liaison role to the library, or is there some sort of MOU that governs that kind of time commitment, or how does that work?
Okay, actually it is our data science specialist. So he works in the library and he's a faculty member. So luckily that's the case there. We also had a group of students called the R Ladies, which I think is like a national organization, and they had a chapter. So sometimes it was nice because even though he is in the library and that's part of his role, he's got a lot of other things, and sometimes, the consultations can only lead so far depending on your capacity. So we were able to like connect them into a community of learners as well. But yeah, it would be really tricky if it wasn't someone within the library, I think, because we're working on that a little bit with some data visualization specialists who work for the Research Computing Office. And they actually have the opposite problem, where they don't get enough business because they don't have any public facing space. So as they move into doing consulting in the library, then I think they'll get more business, and I'll let you know what kind of MOU we might have to come up with, actually.
Thanks. All right, I think we are actually just about out of time, and I think we've run through our questions too. So this is a good time to wrap it up. Thank you everybody for coming today. And thank you again to all of our panelists for joining us and talking about their DH pedagogy and DH services related to pedagogy. Thanks to Alois for getting us all set up today in our space. And I do want to thank Nicole again for doing really the legwork for pulling all of the speakers together today. So thanks everybody for coming, and the recording should go out for this to everybody who registered.